of the 2012 Olympic Games. At centre stage, an 80,000-seat athletic stadium, venue for all track and field events. Building this sporting amphitheatre is a massive undertaking, made bigger by the build's unique design. This is the first Olympic stadium that's been built to be taken apart. Bolted together like a giant Meccano set, it can literally be downsized after the Games.
Everybody said, that's genius, that's a fantastic idea.
But even genius has to deal with reality, and the reality throws up huge challenges. Freak weather, extreme engineering, and an unforeseen financial meltdown. It's an Olympian task and a race London can't afford to lose. North of the River Thames in the heart of London's East End, 2.5 square kilometres of derelict wasteland is about to be transformed.
The Olympic Games will be staged in London in 2012.
I remember seeing the shock or the excitement of everyone actually on stage. My mind was ticking, thinking, yeah, it'd be nice to be part of that.
London won the bid with its promise to deliver a greener, better, less wasteful Games. The jewel in its Olympic crown, an 80,000-seat sporting arena, set to revolutionise stadium design. When it comes to Olympic stadiums, in the past, bigger has seemed better. Beijing's stadium pushed the boundaries of size and spectacle to the limits. But after the Games, big stadiums are expensive to maintain. They don't attract the crowds.
Other than the Olympics, athletics can't justify the sort of scale of building that's built for Olympics.
That is why London is promising to be different. Designing a stadium that can be dismantled and downsized to a 25,000-seat athletics venue after the Games.
So the concept that came along, which was let's not change the sport, change the building, was just so painfully obvious to everybody in sport, really all around the world, that we all just embraced it.
It's this concept of a so-called demountable stadium that forms the cornerstone of London's eco-friendly bid. But it means an engineering adventure into the unknown.
When the news came through, a kind of nanosecond after instant jubilation, we started to think, how do we do this? How's this going to work?
Charged with turning the dream into reality is Team Stadium. Architects, engineers, planning and construction experts, guys with a wealth of experience at the top of their game. Heading up the team, Ian Crockford, project sponsor. He must deliver the Olympic venue on time and on budget.
We're breaking all kinds of benchmarks and records that you'd normally have in the industry. You really need the best brains you can get in the business.
Principal architect Rod Sheard. He's designed plenty of stadiums, but none quite like this.
Do something that perhaps some might have thought was just not possible. That's really special.
Paul Westbury, principal engineer.
To be able to design a stadium building for your own Olympic Games, I guess, is a dream come true.
He must ensure that the architect's plans literally stand up. Tony Aikenhead, project director. He's managing the construction consortium.
We don't get too many opportunities to do this sort of things in our lifetime.
Working with Team Stadium are a host of experts on the ground. each playing their part in transforming the flat-pack building into a world stage for sport. It's a brief that will push the team to its limits and put London's ambitions to the test. From the moment they win the bid, the Olympic countdown begins. To hit the 2012 deadline, the team must fast-track the project. So they devise a plan to design and build the stadium at the same time.
You start working to a very, very tight schedule, all of a sudden you've really got to move fast.
Moving fast is hard when you're trying to be different. The team have promised to create the most flexible sports theatre in the world. But turning the concept into concrete proves difficult, and the first problem they hit is a big one. The dimensions for the stadium site have arrived, but the land allocated for the build is confined on 3 sides by tributaries of the River Lee, and it's just too small for an Olympic stadium.
When we started our first studies, we just took a typical 60,000 seat stadium and we placed it on the site and found, to our horror, that it didn't actually fit.
The lack of space is a huge issue.
Yeah, it's too big right now, I can tell.
The team must rethink the whole design. They start by breaking it down to its component parts.
That's what we've been told right now.
And realize that the catering facilities normally built inside the stadium could be stripped out.
Get rid of that.
And that. So we looked at sort of pulling them out into sort of modular pod units. And by pulling them out of the structure, it then meant that the main form of the stadium was able to shrink in.
With this one ingenious idea, the team have shrunk the stadium to fit, and maybe even enhanced the spectator experience.
We've got this wonderful site, we've got a river around it, we're virtually an island, a little party city out there.
But back on site, there are other issues to solve. The land set aside for the Olympic Park is beset with problems.
There's a lot of tipping there, a lot of waste around. It was a bit of an unloved area of London, I guess.
There have been many chemical industries on this site for many, many years. There were battery factories, watch factories. The contamination had to be cleaned up.
Over 200 buildings and derelict factories must be knocked down before building can begin. Above ground, it's a mammoth demolition job. But there's an even bigger, potentially deadly problem lurking beneath. In World War II, London came under aerial attack. The city's East End suffered badly. Of the 1,500 bombs dropped here, it's believed more than 200 failed to detonate. And some may have fallen within the Olympic site. The authorities can't take any chances and commission a huge survey to identify the risks.
We're literally digging 20 to 30 metres into the ground, putting the foundations in for this structure. You've got to be absolutely sure there's no what's called unexploded ordnance down there before you actually start your operation.
Meanwhile, the architects and engineers are feeling the pressure too. The deadline for the stadium's planning application is fast approaching, but the mechanics of creating such a large yet stylish demountable venue seem impossible.
Making sure that we've got enough stiffness, lightness, elegance, deliverability and geometry, and it can be taken down.
It's quite a tall order, isn't it?
As the weeks pass, design after design is rejected.
We started looking initially at some quite elaborate schemes, but for various reasons they just weren't working.
The design names reflect the chronology of passing time.
Those early days when we were going through, the rainbow and the Valentine and the Mother's Day scheme, was probably more fraught than any other time. And the thing that woke you up in the middle of the night was, what if we don't find a solution?
Only by ripping up the rulebook do they start to solve the problem.
Rod actually said, okay, we're going to try and remove all of those sort of preconceptions that we have about what a stadium is and how it looks.
I suppose it took us 3 or 4 months before, as a team, what we described as embracing the temporary really set hold.
And I think at that point we all thought, okay, this actually now is taking us in an interesting direction.
That's when all the really good ideas started to flow.
The team decide to split the stadium into parts, separating the upper temporary structure from the permanent track and lower seating area.
Around the point to evacuate the first.
This way they can meet the planning application deadline for one part of the stadium at least, and buy themselves extra thinking time for the rest.
It's quite complex, isn't it? It's interesting.
But it's a gamble, signing off on one part of the stadium without knowing exactly how the rest will fit together.
I remember thinking, goodness, this isn't going to give us any scope for manoeuvre as we develop the rest of the design. It's not something I think we've ever done before, and it certainly kept a few of us awake at night.
Spring 2008. More than 4 years ago, the site of London's Olympic Stadium has been transformed. With demolition complete, it's time to start digging the foundations. There's 800,000 tons of soil. That's the equivalent of 27 aircraft carriers to be removed. But it's potentially hazardous stuff. Many of the factories that once stood here produced toxic waste, and the whole area must be cleaned. A soil hospital was set up on site. In one of the biggest operations of its kind, the earth is decontaminated before being reused to landscape the Olympic Park. As groundworks complete 3 months ahead of schedule, construction of the Stadium Bowl can begin. The beating heart of the sports arena, the bowl contains the field of play and concrete seating for 25,000 spectators. Sunk into the ground, it's the only part of the stadium designed to be permanent. And the only part that's been approved so far. 6 months ago, the team made the decision to split the stadium design into sections and stagger the planning application for each part.
We were still designing the rest of the project as we were going along, but we were in the field getting a march on the construction program itself.
But now they must deliver their plan for the rest of the build.
Where are we on our analysis of that little piece?
The tension in the lift.
Their big challenge has been finding a way to make the upper stadium demountable, easy to disassemble after the games.
West and east.
So currently we have fairly long span trusses.
And they solved it by going back to basics. Designing a stadium that can be assembled like a giant 3D jigsaw.
I used to play with Meccano when I was a kid. No surprises there. And it's very, very similar to a giant Meccano kit, this building. It's made out of steel elements that are bolted together so that they can be unbolted and put back in the Meccano box.
Now construction on the upper structure can begin. 112 black steel rakers provide support for the 55,000 seats above ground level. All the parts are prefabricated off-site, making the build faster and simpler. From here on up, there's no welding on site. 126,000 bolts will fix the temporary sections in place. Not only is the design beautifully simple, it's perfectly small too. This is one of the most compact stadiums of its kind ever built, and it's designed to give the spectators a unique view of the games.
We really set our objective to get those spectators as absolutely tight and as close to those performances as we possibly could.
But getting the spectators close to the action is a tough ask. It's impossible to change the track dimensions.
The shape of the track and the field is a given, it's a fix.
So the team approach it from a different angle, literally breaking down the barrier between audience and athlete.
Normally at the front row here, that's where you would often see a 2 metre high wall and run all the way around a track in many stadia around the world. But we actually get rid of that wall and put the front row right down at that track level, so that the person in that front row is as close as possible to where the track is.
Because there are no catering facilities inside the stadium itself, there's no wasted space between the tiers.
Because we don't actually have any layers of hospitality or boxes, we've been able to get the upper tier right down really as close as possible to the track.
It'll make for an edge-of-your-seat viewing experience. Though in any stadium, an overexcitable crowd can be a problem. This amateur footage filmed in 2010 during a football match in Germany's Nuremberg Stadium shows what can happen on the terraces when tens of thousands of fans move en masse. It's a potentially big problem in a stadium as lightweight as London's.
The more massive we make the structure, the more unlikely it is to move. So the lighter we make our structure, the more likely it is to move.
If we're not careful, we can get the whole stadium resonating away, which is generally bad news, so...
The engineers must find a way of mitigating the risk of dynamic movement in the terraces.
The key thing here being understanding any rhythmic loading from people jumping up and down and getting excited.
Using computer models, they tackle the engineering conundrum. They think the answer is to modify the diagonal trusses that support the terraces.
The deeper the truss is, the stiffer it is. So we're balancing all these issues just to ensure not only does it carry the load safely, but we don't get any uncomfortable dynamic effects.
But with the build racing ahead, architect Rod Sheard is busy thinking about what the stadium will look like from the outside. Plans so far show a fabric wrap featuring printed images of the Olympic events. But conscious that the world will be watching, Rod's got something much more ambitious in mind.
Go back to that explosion coming out of the logo. I think that's yes.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't think we made that from Refinery.
A digital screen wrapping right round the kilometre-long stadium exterior that will animate during the games.
We can literally use the building to broadcast to those hundreds of thousands of people who will be within viewing distance of the building. We could even put up results.
But just as the digital dream starts to take shape, chaos hits. Global economies go into recession. Private investors for the London Olympics disappear. The government is forced into a bailout. Compared to the bid price, the estimated cost of building the stadium has nearly doubled to £525 million. It can't escalate anymore. Rod's ambitious plans for the wrap are shelved.
We're in agreement. Yes.
January 2009. Despite the economic crisis, works must continue on London's Olympic site. biggest construction task yet. Assembling the roof. In most stadiums, the roof and the bowl are attached.
We tend to use the weight of the bowl to stabilise the weight of the roof.
But in this stadium, there's no structural connection between the two parts. The roof is freestanding and must support itself.
You can literally lift the legs and the roof off and put it in Hyde Park, and it would stand up and be perfectly viable.
On top of the legs, the roof sits in 3 parts. The outer ring, an inner ring, and a series of connecting cables that when pulled tight will lift the whole roof into place. On site, the outer ring of the roof, a structure called the compression truss, is taking shape. A 1,350-ton super crane maneuvers each 90-ton section into position.
It's one of those roof structures where, in its temporary state, you need to almost wish it into place.
To make it as eco-friendly as possible, the stadium is built using recycled materials. Some sections are made from melted down scrap, others salvaged directly from an abandoned gas pipeline project. Piece by piece, it's all bolted together until it starts to look like a giant upturned crown. But in the 6 months it takes to assemble, each section of the truss will expand and contract a little. And now the last piece is ready to go in, it turns out to be too small for the gap.
So the first thing we've got to make sure is that the truss sections themselves,
unless it fits tightly together, the roof will have no strength.
How are we going to make sure that the joint fits?
The answer lies in the stadium's Meccano-style design. By tightening up the bolts in the compression truss, the team can make the whole ring smaller, shrinking the 20mm gap till the last piece is a perfect fit. Now it's straight on to the next building challenge. Assembling the part of the roof that will stretch over the arena, sheltering the field of play. It's a cable net design, and it has hidden strengths.
cables work very well in tension. That's when you pull them. If you look at this purple cable here, if you can imagine this was a washing line, and if it wasn't very taut and you hang washing on it, then you'd get quite a lot of sag. If you actually really tighten that washing line up and put that same washing on, it wouldn't deflect as much, it wouldn't sag as much. So that's the principle of pre-stressing the cables to stop it deflecting when you get load on it.
The physics may be simple, but the scale is massive. The roof's outer circumference stretches to almost a kilometre. At the epicenter of the 450-ton structure is the inner ring. When the cables are put into tension, the ring will be lifted into place, its weight transferred to the outer truss and down to the ground. This lift will be the biggest of its kind ever attempted in the UK. And one man especially is feeling the pressure. Construction manager Chris Keenan. It's Chris's job to coordinate the lift, and it's a career first.
I've used similar technologies on bridges, but actually pulling the cables that fit the roof and pulling all the pieces at once to make that shape is something really new. A very nerve-wracking time.
Months of preparation have already gone into the lift. 12,000 meters of cables are integral to the design.
We've got to mark the cables in the right places, so when we do connect everything, when we pull the cables at the end, it will be in the right place.
The giant steel inner ring is laid out on temporary scaffolding ready for the lift. Once the lift starts, time is of the essence.
How long is that going to take before we get the compression ring up in the air and fully tensioned?
Maybe 5 days.
If there's a storm comes in, then things could bounce around a little. At every point along that journey, things are a little bit unstable. Could be unstable.
With one eye on the forecast, and with urgent last-minute briefings on site, Chris gives the go-ahead.
We'll be moving on to stage 5 in about half an hour time.
The lift begins. 56 hydraulic jacks start to stress and stretch the cables that will pull the inner ring and lift the roof into place. Despite the massive forces involved, this is precision engineering. If just one cable is pulled too tightly or too quickly, it could snap. Over 5 adrenaline-fueled days, the 450-ton roof structure is lifted into place. The jacks are switched off, and the cable net holds up. Proof that the team have got their calculations right. Though the construction race is far from over. This roof must not only bear its own weight, but also that of 14 immense lighting towers that will be placed on top to illuminate the field of play.
We've got tons of lighting rig sat 60 metres in the air on top of a fairly flexible cable net roof.
Sounds like a physical impossibility, but for Team Stadium, it's just another hurdle for another day. January 2010. Britain is suffering its coldest winter in 30 years. For Team Stadium, the big freeze delays work on site.
We've had some bad winters, really severe times of 2 weeks basically. There was just ice everywhere.
We couldn't get our labour force to work. And we wouldn't have asked them to work in those conditions. It was too dangerous.
If only we could manage the weather.
Now, there's a huge amount to do to get the stadium back on schedule. The next big job? Positioning 14 giant lighting towers on top of the stadium roof. It'll take more than 500 floodlights to light up London's games. The whole arena must be well lit.
You've got so many diverse events taking place in so many different extremities of that field. So at an Olympic Stadium, the lighting rig and the angles of light are really critical so you don't get the shadows on running around everywhere.
But with each tower blasting over 70,000 watts of light, there's a danger people will be dazzled by the glare.
You have to design the sports lights so that they're at quite a steep angle. Otherwise they're in the eye line of spectators and TV cameras.
In most stadiums, it's no problem placing the lights on the roof, where they can sit high above the action. But London's Olympic Stadium is so compact, the roof is too low.
Because we'd actually shrunk the whole building down so much, we then had to come up with a solution that would allow us to create a shape that would put the sports lights in the position they needed to be, but also try and work it in with the architecture of the building.
The answer? Adding 20-metre steel legs to the bottom of each tower, raising the lights high above the field of play.
We actually created effectively a tripod that then was craned in a single lift up into this point in space.
But the only way to attach the steel legs is in mid-air. A 650-ton crane is brought in for the job. With everything hanging on a wire, the team work fast. Each tower now weighs in at 34 tons and is the height of a 5-story building. But they can't afford any mistakes, because they're not the only people working at height here. At the other end of the stadium, a team of 23 abseilers are attaching giant pieces of mesh to the cable-knit roof. In just a few weeks, they'll be stretching a fabric cover over the terraces, and this mesh will be their safety walkway. To stay on schedule, the abseilers must rig now. It's a delicate balancing act. The roof is made entirely of cables, hydraulically stretched and tensioned to give inherent strength. Now, as the abseilers walk the wire, and as the construction team make final preparations on the ground, they're about to find out exactly how strong their roof is. The first lighting tower is ready to be lifted into place. A 34-ton triangle of steel to be balanced on a cable ring 1.5 meters wide.
That is actually supported only on the front cable of the roof, so when we all rushed out to watch the first one go up, it was quite a scary prospect to see this actually drop down onto the front cable.
For now, the tower is stabilized by a steel strut at the back. But once all the lights are in position, the strut will be removed and the tower's held in place by just a string of tension cables.
Of course, they're only stable with their current design once all 14 are up.
The team must work quickly. But as more towers go up, so does the weight. When all 14 are in place, they will add close to 500 tons. More than doubling the weight of the roof and making the inner ring drop by almost 0.5 meters. If they're not placed in absolutely the correct order, the inner ring could become unbalanced by the immense weight.
The sequence is absolutely essential. You actually arrange the lights around the ring so that when they're all in place, the balance is equal.
From above, it's starting to look like a real Olympic theatre. But from the ground, it's a very different story. It's not exactly a beautiful building. The skeleton exterior is all bones and no flesh. If it's to be a fitting venue for the biggest show on Earth, the architects must give the stadium a facelift. Over a year ago, the team's plans for an animated digital wrap were shelved. So they've come up with another plan. A wrap of brightly coloured fabric twists.
We realized that the enclosure was a statement in itself. It's about what is the building saying to people when they're approaching it.
At £7 million, it's a fraction of the price of the old animated wrap. But the team think it will bring the stadium to life.
I mean, architects shy away from colour because colour's notoriously difficult to maintain. No architect wants a faded piece of glory. Once we realised that this wasn't a building that had the last 25, 50 years, you could start thinking about it in different ways.
But in inside the stadium there are more urgent problems to tackle. High winds have hit without warning, and the team are lifting one of the last lighting towers.
Yeah, just got a little bit now, just a bit of a gush. Find anyone to get the next.
In this phase of the build, the weather has always been a worry.
What we do, Jack?
As you can imagine, with all of the prefabricated parts being brought in and lifted at high level, it made us susceptible to windy conditions, and it is quite an exposed site.
If the wind speed approaches 20 kilometers per hour, they'll have to stop.
We're checking the weather window prior to lifting. It's one of the checks from on the day before. So we should know if we're anticipating those sort of winds.
The team have planned carefully, but the British weather is notoriously unpredictable. To avoid disaster, they must act fast, working together to stop the monster's structure from spinning out of control.
I don't want to see one of them shoot off there.
A moment's loss of concentration could mean disaster.
Just hold it there for a sec. You got about 300 mil. Hold it there. 200 mil for that and keep it coming down nice and steady. You really nailed it here. 20 mil down if you would please, Mark.
At last, the team's tenacity pays off.
Hold it there, fella. That's lovely.
Today's battle with the weather is won. But the race to finish the roof is still in the offing. And anyone scared of heights needn't apply. This is the abseiler's big moment. Fitting the 25,000 square meters of fabric that makes up the stadium roof. It's not there just to provide protection from the elements.
A lot of people think roofs are there for the spectators, and they're not really. They're there for the athletes.
For those chasing medals, the roof offers vital protection from tailwinds, which if they exceed 2 meters per second could invalidate a world-beating performance. It's what happened in Rome in 1960.
Outstanding single performer of the game was Wilma Rudolph of Tennessee.
Wilma Rudolph's 100-meter Olympic record was disallowed when it was proven strong tailwinds had given her an advantage. It's not a scenario Team Stadium wants to repeat.
Imagine Usain Bolt's world record being disqualified because the wind speed was too high. So we have to design the building to protect the environment for the athletes to perform at their best.
But London's Olympic site is exposed to southwesterly winds. It's crucial the roof provides extra protection.
We needed to shelter the field of play, and that's what a roof does. Without a roof at all, the wind comes over the stadium and then circulates and creates swirly conditions down on the field of play.
So London's roof is designed to act like a giant shield. The fabric covering diverts crosswinds up and over the stadium. Take away the fabric and the wind drops down, creating a vortex inside the bowl. But the roof isn't effective until it's all in place. Each of the 112 PVC fabric pieces is custom cut. Pre-packed, complete with its own fittings, it's unfolded in situ before being stretched and clipped to the cable net. Getting the right piece to fit the right place is like doing a giant high-wire puzzle. The safety mesh comes into its own. these high-wire antics, the roof is complete. But outside the Olympic site, all is not well. Britain is still in the grip of recession, and the whole country is cost-cutting. Until now, London's 2012 budget has been ring-fenced, but suddenly the government do a U-turn, withdrawing £27 million of Olympic funding.
So you need to get all that done and get that paid.
Team Stadium must take a hit of £7 million, and at this stage the only thing that can be slashed is the wrap. Will this go down in history as the stadium that failed to impress? London's pride is at stake. Just over a year to go, and London's stadium is starting to look like a real Olympic theatre. Since building began, 11 kilometres of drainage has been dug, 338 kilometres of power cable laid, and 80,000 spectator seats fitted. Inside, so much has been achieved. 12 kilometres of ventilation laid, 700 rooms fitted, and 1,387 toilets installed. Meanwhile, on the field of play, one of the most iconic events of the entire build is about to begin. It takes more than 360 rolls of turf to lay over 9,000 square meters of pitch. This will be the athletic battleground for all field events. Cultivated 400 kilometers away, each roll is freshly cut and transported to site within 24 hours. Each section has to join seamlessly. If the level varies by more than 5 millimeters from one end of the pitch to another, javelin and shot put results will be invalid. It's a splash of colour in the monochrome arena, and an iconic milestone for Team Stadium. 4 years after they set out on their engineering journey, they've created a building that could change the face of Olympic stadium design. Not only can the structure be taken apart after the Games, it's one of the lightest, most compact stadiums of its kind ever. And one of the most eco-friendly too, built using a fraction of the steel of previous Olympic arenas.
I think it's something that we should all be very proud of. I think the legacy here is going to be fantastic.
It's taken 5,000 workers more than 1,000 days to complete. It's been a sprint to the finish. But the race isn't over yet. There's still a vital piece of the stadium that's missing. Last year, the Olympic authorities scrapped funding for a brightly coloured wrap. For Team Stadium, it was a bitter blow.
Yeah, it was disappointing. It was, I suppose, a kind of sense of loss more than anything else, that it wasn't going to be quite what we had in mind, quite what we visualised.
That vision has taken many forms, but it's always been about making sure this building wows the crowds. Now, at the 11th hour, the team catch an incredible break. A private sponsor steps forward. Rod's dream can be realised. The wrap is back on.
When we finally heard that it was going to happen. It was the most extraordinary feeling. Being an architect for one of these buildings, it's a bit like being a parent. I suppose the RAF is very much like being able to send that child out into the world properly dressed.
Battling the elements through one of the worst financial crises in modern history. At the cost of £486 million, Team Stadium complete the build a year in advance of the Games. As well as a massive engineering achievement, it's been a personal journey.
Every day has been a challenge, but it's been such a blast.
It's come to me quite late in my career, as you can see by my grey hair here, but to work on an Olympic stadium is a once-in-a-lifetime chance.
And after the Olympics, could this Olympic theatre really be taken apart?
It could stay exactly as it is if somebody decides that that's what they would like to do there. But it could also completely be removed, and that's quite
London's promise to build a flexible stadium was the cornerstone of its Olympic bid. Delivering on the promise has been a huge challenge. It's hard to imagine all the effort being undone.
In some ways I'd be very sad for it to come down, but I've got quite an attachment to it now.
I did like the comment that someone told me the other day, it's too beautiful to pull down.
Whatever the shape of the future, this building has already made engineering history. Team Stadium can claim their medal. This Olympic race is won.
Discover the story of the biggest theft in NASA's history in brand new $1 million moon rock heist next Thursday at 9.